السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله حسين حسين
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah to my dear Sheikh Vinay Khetia and my dear brother Neil Nasser. Thank you so much for being here on the Ashura Reflections podcast. This series, we're looking at reform, Islah, and its different dimensions. And we're starting off by looking at the human being and saying, well, how do I reform myself? What am I in order to reform? And today's episode is based on the mind and what we mean by this word and how the individual can prioritize themselves and prioritize their mind in their process towards reformation and internal growth. And like it's obvious, it's the month of Muharram, and we have Abu Abdullah as that example for us for why we want to reform or reforming into in our individual journey. There is something Imam Hussein offers us to get to where we need to go. And it's really great if we try this episode, we can try to unpack how it is I can link my own internal progress and mindfulness and welfare with the majlis I'm going to be going to every night, or with the example of Imam Hussein. And when I leave these 10 days of Muharram, how do I keep to my goals using Abu Abdullah in a more sustainable way than the end of Ashura, for example? And of course, this goes back to the mind and mindfulness. But before we get to that topic, I want to look at the word reform again, just so we know what it means to reform oneself, because Imam Hussein does use this word, and I should know what he means by it. So first question is to you, Sheikh Vinay. Firstly, thank you so much for accepting this podcast. When I use the word reform or Islah, and when Imam Hussein uses that word, what is this concept which we're describing?
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين. Al-Islah, of course, is a term that is used, it comes from Salaha, from the Quran, of course. Salihin are those that have set themselves right, those that are, it's usually an adjective that describes the pious ones. So you could think of Islah almost as a return to piety. But Islah is a constant movement. It's not a one-time movement, but there's different degrees of Islah. So we're constantly in a state, the mu'min should constantly be in a state of Islah of him or herself. And Islah, of course, comes about through self-contemplation, through muhasabah. So what the Imam is referring to here, Salamullahi alayhi, is Islah, of course, on a much grander scale, right? Islah, both at the individual level, but Islah at the societal level. Al-Islah fi ummati jaddi, right? That he's seeking reform in the ummah of his grandfather, salamullahi alayhi. So, yeah, Islah is you could think of as a return to piety, because we're not pious all the time. So we constantly need to be in a state of reform to return to piety. Now, some people have a longer journey than others, depending on how far adrift they have gone.
So that ending especially makes this so much more important for our listeners, because this idea of returning to piety and because Islah has to go back, I might be very far away from that. I might have strayed a long way from that ideal, and I want a way back. And everyone has their own way back, and indeed it's important to look at reform in this dynamic way. Neil, when you're speaking to people who want to make that change and to improve their lives, is it important to note that we are on different journeys, and how is that relevant to the goals we set ourselves?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum to everybody on this podcast, all the viewers. Assalamu alaikum, Abu Abdullah, and to the way to savior of humanity, Imam Ajalallahu Farah Sharif. So yes, everyone's journey is different. So regardless of people that I'm coaching, mentoring, etc., everybody wants to seek that reformation of themselves. They want to betterment themselves. And depending who you're speaking to, as the respected Sheikh did say, everybody's journey of return or reformation, they may have strayed slightly off the path, or they may have strayed quite away from the path. And that could be spiritually, that could be emotionally, financially, it could be within their own intimate relationships, it could be anything. So generally people lose direction, they lose sight of their end goal. People don't invest enough in actually discovering what their goal is, their end term or their long-term goal, and then understanding what the short-term goals or the medium-term solutions would be to actually reach that end destination. So putting in that work to find that journey, it does support in that transformation of that reformation, that return to that particular state that you want to get to. So looking at the lessons that we can learn from the 10th of Muharram and the stance of Abu Abdullah, there's so many things that we can take away from it. And I'm sure we'll go through that throughout this podcast, inshallah.
Inshallah, yeah, there's a lot of themes there. Let's pick it up on one of the features of Islah, which you mentioned, Sheikh, which was the idea that it's a constant movement, that you're kind of continuously moving towards an objective. In this case, it's going back to your origin, but you don't stay still, you're not stagnant. Some people don't think they need change. They don't think that they need to improve, or the idea of reform and applying it to oneself, it's just not someone's priority. But I get the impression that Islam wants us to grow and it wants us to push ourselves in that way. How does this look? What is Islam's plan for our development? Are we being pushed like this to improve to our potential in Islam? And how does it look?
As long as we have certain faculties like quwwat al-ghadabiyya, quwwat al-shahawiyya, and other faculties like that, you know, we have the faculty of anger, faculty of lust. Those will always be with us. There is nothing that we can do about these faculties. It doesn't matter who you are in this world, obviously, except for the impeccable ones, the tayyibin, tahirin, ma'sumin. Otherwise, each and every one of us have these faculties. Perhaps somebody may just be so blind and so ignorant of themselves to think that they don't need to reform. I mean, if you think about the message of the Quran, it is constantly to become kunu qawamin bil qist, right? Be among those that stand for equity and justice. Kunu ma'a sadiqin. Be among those that are truthful. Be present. Can anybody claim that they are 100% 24/7 present with the Sadiqeen? At every single moment, in every single iota of their body and their mind and their presence? No. So thus, every single one of us have some improvement to do. It is only kibr and arrogance that prevents that from occurring, or self-holiness, or what you know, some kind of self-sanctimonious, you know, feeling about oneself.
Amazing.
When I hear you speak about to be present, I think of the concept of mindfulness and presence of mind. And that stuff I've spoken to you about, Neil, before as well. People are just not in touch with themselves in this way, that I have to become something or I have to progress into something. What is mindfulness, and why is that a relevant thing to this discussion?
Mindfulness can be broken down in so many ways. It's about knowledge of self is the biggest overarching thing. So knowledge of your own capabilities, your own expansion. When we talk about Western philosophy, like the law of attraction, thinking in a positive mindset, knowing that you're capable and you have the power to be better than you can potentially be. Finding your own self-happiness and feeling the love initially for yourself and believing in yourself and your own capabilities. Having that mindset switching on, that almost, to use again a Western philosophy, is that third eye vision, that kind of internalness. We should know and understand that we could spend 20, 30 hours a week in the gym, but we're only training 20% of our power. 80% is from within, from your internal. And when you look at Eastern philosophy, such as Shaolin or martial arts or Buddhists, they use that calmness, that stillfulness, the meditation to understand how they can release that power. How can they tie in their chakras within their body and use that powerfulness through the chi and through the energy within. For once somebody asked the Prophet, peace be upon him, how can I come closer to you in Jannah? How can I come closer to you in Jannah? And his answer was so sublime. He said, spend longer in your sujood. Now, through my teachings and my background in terms of martial arts and meditation, I understand that there's 7 exit points when you are breathing and your chakra points. Now, what are those 7 points? That's the 7 points that you touch the masalo, the toba with, that you're able to extend yourself. For the breath that you take when you're in sujood, when you're in sajda, is very powerful in terms of exiting negative energy. So then I link the two together, the Islamic principle and the philosophy of the mind, the body, the chi, the chakras, and have that overarching. For Amir Mu'mineen says, do not rush to the masala. Do not pray in a state of tiredness. Be mindful and present for what you're doing. Why did the Prophet, peace be upon him, say that an hour worth of contemplation could equal to this amount, or even 7 years of worship, 70 years of worship in some narrations? Because that state of tranquilness, as the respected Sheikh says, that state of where you can just be calm within yourself, be fluid, is the way you can control yourself. For the best example of this is water. You know, I teach a lot of my clients to be like water, because water is one of the purest and most fiercest and ferocious, but cleansing and powerful substances on this earth. You can freeze it, it becomes very hard, but it's very fluid and very flexible. It can move around, but then it can be like a torrent, which sometimes it's like us within ourselves. It could be like a waterfall, but then it can be calm and it can be still. And knowing that you're on a journey like a river, you're flowing, ever flowing, and sometimes you pick up sediment, sometimes you'll hit a rock and they won't come along with you, but you can move around it and you might bring a part with that with you on your journey. Why is water so powerful? Again, we know through our wudu, through our ghusl, the purity that water can give us, it puts us into that state where we are clean and pure. So that mindfulness and that mind state, it helps you to contemplate further on the Creator and increase your spirituality, lift your ruh when you're worshiping, and be able to be more connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
It's interesting because a person could spend their whole life following this religion and not look for these, internal or esoteric realities. The batin is so easy to just replicate and copy, whether you're just doing wudu or praying or these things. You can spend a whole lifetime and never ponder on the meaning or at least the development of that to yourself. And yet, when you look at the tradition, it's like establish prayer for my remembrance. And then you think, well, what does that mean? It's hidden within our tradition that the external actions have within them a benefit that you need to contemplate. You need to really think about them to find them sometimes. And Sheikh, when I look at those different traditions, it makes me think that we need to use our mind when it comes to the amal we're doing. And there's a big difference between doing them without it and with it. Why is it important that I'm mentally engaged in my worship?
I think that one of the first steps is that, as Imam Sadiq alayhi salam tells us, one of his companions asked him, the riwayah it's in Bab al-Du'a of Al-Kafi, where the Imam was asked, I find my prayers are not being answered by Allah. And he tells him, I'm paraphrasing the hadith, يعني كيف تدعو بما لا تفهم or بما لا تعرف? How do you ask Allah of something that you yourself don't know? Right? You're not present because you have not taken the Imam is telling his companion that you are not present in your relationship with Allah because you don't even know what you want from Allah. You've not thought about it. You've not taken a step back to think about what it is that you want from Allah. What is it that you are asking from Allah? Right? And this is the beginning of that process, right? That we have to step back and look at the quality of our worship and not the quantity of our worship, right? We have to ask ourselves, how much of our worship do we actually understand? Do we actually endeavor to understand? And then focus on those things that we understand, as opposed to trying to knock off like a huge list of nawafil and mustahabat, right? It's just like training. I've been on a journey for the past 18 months in terms of physical training as well. And it's always taking one baby step at a time, one baby step at a time, right? And then you realize when you look back at the journey 18 months later or 20 months later, you're like, wow, oh my God, I wasn't concentrating on achieving results today, right? I put all that behind me. Then when I look back 20 months later, it's like started off with 5 push-ups, now you're doing like 50, but you're not concentrating on attaining goals today. I think that's often sometimes the frustration in spirituality. Not that I'm making an like I don't want to make a complete analogy between physical training and spirituality, of course, but it's something people can relate to maybe, which is that don't focus on achieving results today. Just focus on being present in what you're doing at the moment. And worry about results and all that stuff. That when you're lowered into your grave and Munkar and Nakir come, inshallah, then you'll know what the results were when you're asked the questions about your religion and your book and your prophet and your imam. That's the only time when you're really going to know the results. Until then, you just put your best foot forward, right? And sometimes we're so, we have so much anxiety about not doing things right that we're not present in the moment which we are in. And like, for example, I see this in the month of Ramadan all the time. Even on the day of Ashura, the Amal is so long. I mean, yes, the Aimma, the Ashab would do these Amal, but we are not Aimma and we are not Muhammad bin Muslim and Abu Basir. I mean, these Amal are ours. By the time the brothers and I'm not saying not to do the Amal, by the way. It is Sunnah, of course, from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. But by the time the brother comes to mourn for Imam al-Hussein, he's sitting there, the speaker is reciting, he's got his eyes closed. Because he's been up since 8 o'clock doing 1,000 this and 1,000 that and 100 this and 100 that. And I tell him, Baba, you're not Sheikh Bahajat. Yes, the Urafa, Fuqaha, Ulama, they have developed their soul to the point that they're present in every moment of those amal. Yes. And inshallah, if your taqat and your imkan, your ability is to do that, then fine. But remember, these are mustahabats. Focus on being present with the tragedy of Imam Hussein on the day of Ashura and not on completing a grocery list of hundreds of repetitions of tasbihat and adhkar and I don't know, all these other things. And that's, I think, because this is an episode about Muharram, again, this is not a criticism of the Amal. I believe in the Amal, I perform the Amal, I believe it is authentic, but it's mustahab. What is more important on that day? Being present and crying for Imam Hussein alayhi salam with your heart, or going through like a 1 or 2 hour marathon of different prayers? If you can't do both, if you can do both, then may Allah bless you, and give you more tawfiq. But, just be present with the Imam on that day. Besides Ziyarat Ashura, of course, do some things that are most important, but that's kind of what my point is. Do what you know how to do, focus on it and understand it.
Yeah, I think sometimes I totally agree, Sheikh. Sometimes it's like a tick box exercise. Some of the mustahab, amal, and like you say, it can go on 2, maybe 3 hours sometimes. It's very difficult to be present for that length of time. It's better to, like you said, quality over quantity. So picking up, doing something in a very mindful way, grounding yourself and being present at that time is so important. And then ask yourself, what do you take from the day of Ashura? What do you actually take from the lessons of Imam Hussein alayhi salam? Because some of the finer things that we've been doing in London is going out on the procession and taking teams of people to walk alongside the procession and to explain to the general public who this amazing person was, this amazing, most inspiring person was. Why do we choose to do that? And then learn and teach people about this phenomenon that inspired people like Nelson Mandela and Charles Dickens, and you relate it to people. That way, sometimes the message is spread further and wider, which I believe can be more impactful.
Yeah, I completely agree. That's the and that's the goal. right? And I find in my personal experience that you start enjoying religion more. Religion is meant to be enjoyed. Quran is meant to be enjoyed. You know, dua is meant to be enjoyed. It's not meant to feel like a chore. If it does, if your deen is not making you happy, then there's a problem. Honestly, you should feel happy, you know. And if it's not, then you got to go and do some serious contemplation over yourself. Maybe you're doing too much. Maybe you're not focused. I don't know. There's all kinds of things, but start by asking yourself the question, are you happy?
I think that reminds me of the hadith from Imam Ali alayhi salam, who says, don't inherit your religion, learn your religion. So a lot of people are born into their religion and they pick up what I would say, I talk to myself as cultural kind of ritualistic actions and not really understand the purpose behind it. So me being a decade into this religion, like coming towards this religion, the only thing I get from listening to the pulpit is about care for humanity. And when I read the trilogy of books, the Torah and the Bible and the Quran, the overarching thing is to love thy neighbor, love the planet, love the creation, right? So if I'm helping a homeless person one day and then the next day I'm traveling to help an orphan, or if I'm looking after my neighbor, then surely this is what these lessons teach us about humanity, about dignity, about pride, about the reformation of self, but reformation of others. And that's where I enjoy the religion. Like I seriously enjoy, and I'm proud to be a Shia of Ali, proud to be that message. You know, the one who went out in the middle of the night and fed people and, you know, covered his face. I enjoy that element of it because that's what I get from the message, the overarching message.
Yeah,
Sorry.
subhanAllah. And, you know, Brother Neil, there's something to add to that. I think there's a concept in Islamic ethics called ithar. يعني إيثار النبي إيثار الله على نفسه إيثار الآخرين على نفسه. It's just to prefer three things over yourself. First and foremost, you prefer God over everything else. Second, you prefer the Nabi and his family over everything else. Third, you prefer everyone around you over yourself. And these are the three steps in Islamic spiritual psychology to attain both felicity and happiness.
SubhanAllah.
Right? Which is called ithar. And this is wazi. I mean, we know this in the books of Islamic spirituality. There's long discussions. We have studied these things for many years with our teachers. And when we see their lives, especially the lives of our great teachers, of our maraja, of the great students, the people that I've studied with, at least personally, all I see in their life is this preference of others over themselves. And then Allah raises their rank because of that, right? So they become so well known for the right reasons. They become famous, not infamous, because of their love for others over themselves, or their love for teaching, their love for spreading knowledge, their love for not keeping their knowledge to themselves, but in teaching others selflessly. And assisting, you know, one of the biggest lessons that I've seen is assisting those that haven't, let's say, got to their level, but they want to bring them up, right? So they'll go out of their way if they see somebody who has that desire or that interest to learn, they'll go out of their way to grab his or her hand, of course, not literally her hand, to bring her up or him up. That's ithar, right? Because you're not worried about your position. You see, we live in a world where we're worried about helping others because it might challenge my position of superiority or authority. And that's the nafs, right? And we'll never be happy, I think, until we learn to fight that. We learn to release that and just, like you said, kind of be like water.
Yeah,
It's a
pushing
great,
down
it's a
that.
great metaphor, Neil, that water thing.
Oh, I use it all the time. I had a coaching session this morning, actually. Alhamdulillah, I've got a 72-year-old sister in that she's in my practice, and she's Shia. And we were sitting by some water today, and we were looking at the stillness of the water and that reflection of the water, because it's just the greatest thing to kind of look and visualize. And, you know, when you're in that state of where you cannot focus in your salah, how many times we're praying Zohar, for instance, and we don't, whether we're on the third rakat, the fourth rakat, we don't know, because we're not mindful, we're not present. We don't take the time at the beginning. Yes, recite the azan, recite Qama, but stand for a few minutes, Baba, and just breathe. Like just breathe and feel the earth around you. Engage your senses. You have 5 senses, Allah. Alhamdulillah, most of us have the 5 senses, right? We can smell, we can taste, we can hear, we can visualize. And then as we're going around and we're seeing these amazing things, you know, trees and birds and the sky and the creation of Allah, take mental pictures, you know, teach the brain, it's NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, right? Why not look at a tree or a beautiful sunset or a rainbow and just remember that? And when you're ready to pray, just stand for 2 minutes even. Just breathe 3 short breaths. Imagine that beautiful rainbow. And believe you me, you'll enhance your salah. These kind of tricks, and I'm calling them tricks, they're not really tricks. And I'm giving away my secrets here. So you can still
Yeah, people usually pay money for this. And here we are.
They pay money for this. So yeah, you know, still contact me, NMN Life Solutions. But listen, guys, honestly, and all joking apart, these are the things that will help you to connect. These are the things that will enhance your spirituality and help you to reform yourself, because it's all about that reformation of self to get you closer to the oneness of God.
I think the religion that comes from this approach is so much more real and authentic, and even actually it's more honest, which is most important. I think religion is not being imposed on me. It's not something I'm forcing myself to do. I'm just being myself. I mean, even nature, you mentioned, this is around us. And I'm seeing the signs around me already. They're already there. Now I'm kind of piecing it together. And you have to start with, I think, and I mentioned it before, you have to want to connect these things together. Because if you don't, you could so easily miss out on life by trying to seek a version of religion which was never useful or true in the first place. And that's why hearing the hadith from you, Sheikh Vinay, it puts into perspective our Ahlul Bayt intended us to have this kind of dynamic relationship with the religion. There wasn't meant to be a chore or an errand. The thought which then this proposed me is, if I have a authentic relationship with Islam, I'll then have a more authentic relationship with the Imams, because I'll see them better. I'll see how they were, and I will not impose on them many of these conditions that I have put on myself. I'll see them for what they were. And I wonder if we are being mindful and we look at, for example, Imam Hussein alayhi salam, does he look differently to the one who's looking at them with this lens, rather than the conventional, I go to Majlis and that's the end of the story? How does Abu Abdullah look from the eyes which are presently looking at him?
I think that the hadith, the ahadith of the Aimma answer this question well, right? Because when we perform the ziyarah of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, we ask ourselves certain questions, or we're supposed to ask ourselves certain questions, or be in a certain state, shall I say. So there are different attributes that are opposed to one another, or that are contradictory, or you know, to one another. They're 2 different kind of attributes, right? 2 are blameworthy and 2 are praiseworthy. So we're told in the ziyarah of Imam Hussein alayhi salam that when you enter his dari, or the area of his grave, alayka bil waqar wal sakina, that you should be in a state of waqar and sakina, meaning the state of like trembling humility and peace. And then in another riwayah we read, which is so interesting, in another riwayah, Imam As-Sadiq salamullahi alayhi goes to the negative, and he says that those who visit the Imam, la batran wala riya'an, you know, so on and so forth, that those who go to visit the Imam without any haughtiness, without any conceitedness, without any you know, sense of self-entitlement, then Allah will reward them for every step is Hajj and Umrah and so on and so forth. So our relationship with the Imam and to know whether the Imam Salamullahi alayhi has accepted us into his group will be determined by our state of being when we are with the Imam. Are we there, for the right reasons? Have we thought about why we are there? Are we in a state of sakina and waqar? Now, again, in developing waqar and sakina is a long discussion, not for one podcast. This could be a whole series of discussions that, inshallah, I will be discussing this coming Muharram in Arizona, in Phoenix. But these two attributes, waqar and sakina, become the linchpin, so to speak, to determine whether we are with the Imam or not. And if we cannot develop these attributes within our hearts, then everything of the ziyarah of the Imam and my love of the Imam and my matam for the Imam and azadari and all of that follows kind of becomes just a self-fulfilling exercise. It's kind of something we're doing for ourselves. You see, so Islamic spiritual psychology is very deep. It's very, very deep, and it has many, 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 many darajat and maqamat and levels and steps to it. Attaining these attributes come about, again, waqar and sakina, through self-sacrifice, through ibadah, through contemplation, through avoiding sin, through being conscious of all the entry points to the heart, the eyes, the ears, the mouth, to being conscious of all those entry points, right? Kullu ulaika kana anhu mas'ula, as Allah says, that, that we'll be asked about all of these things, right? The eyes. When the mu'min develops a state of consciousness, that they start really taking these things seriously, and then they realize that all of this will witness against them on the Day of Judgment. Right? That their limbs, that all of these things will witness against them. They enter into a state of spiritual consciousness, of hudur, presence. And when they're in a state of presence, Allah bestows upon them this sakina, this sense of tranquility. And when you approach Imam al-Hussein with this, then you're just present for him at that moment because he's the hujjat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is it. That is the only reason. Then you connect with the Imam in a way that is uncanny, inshallah. But this is deep. I mean, these are things that require a lot of steps. Like, I'll go back to the training metaphor, right? Like, it requires to have a teacher. It requires to take the steps slowly, to understand, to unpack these concepts. Nobody wants to unpack everything, right? People often come to me and they say, Sheikh, if you can't give me something on a bullet point, you're useless. Because I'm a CEO and I don't have time to figure out this waqar and sakina. Then I told them, then you don't have time for Islam. Then this religion is not for you. It's a deep faith. It's deep, it's philosophical, it's mystical, it's esoteric, it's psychological, whatever adjective you want to put to it, it's deep.
Yeah.
And you frankly don't need, you don't need to find some kind of self-help guide to be spiritual. The answers are within our deen. They're within our religion, but you just have to learn to access them and to start understanding them. So that's kind of how I would approach connecting with Imam Hussein alayhi salam, is being present with him. And one of the ways of being present with the Imam, first and foremost, is in understanding his attributes, his sifat. So what is the haqq of the Imam upon you, right? Arifan bihaqqihi, as we read. Man zara al-Hussein arifan bihaqqihi. The one who visits Hussein, aware and cognizant of the right of the Imam over him. And that's it. And then you kind of enter into that state of connection with the Imam. Salamullahi alayhi.
That phrase, being present with the Imam, might be my new favorite way of looking at this, because it summarizes the discipline of spiritual psychology as being relevant to wilaya, and
Of course it is.
to being, my Shiism is linked to this. Neil's going to Karbala. Neil, when you listen to Sheikh speaking like this, inshallah, you're traveling soon. Does that get you in the mood? Does it help in your approach to visualizing actually physically being where all of us wish to be?
Yeah, alhamdulillah, I'm digesting and I was absorbing. I never stop absorbing from the minute I wake up in the morning till the time I go to sleep. I like a sponge. And I guess I look at things from a different lens anyway, not being born into this religion and coming into this religion. I see things from a very holistic picture. Having been able to, blessed to be amongst many different cultures, different religions, and different walks of life, spending time, as I say, in East Africa, or spending time in China and learning with the Shaolin monks and learning different things. When I hear everything and I tie everything together, as I said before, literally it all fits, everything fits. When Allah says there's 124,000 prophets that came to this earth, but we don't know all of them, you know, and when you sit with a monk who can literally float when he meditates because he follows his way of practice, and then I bring that same spiritualness to my prayer mat and able to lift myself up, how can you say his is the wrong way and mine is the right way, yours is right and mine is wrong? It's very connecting. It's like a pieces of jigsaw. So listening to Sheikh and what he's saying, yeah, I'll be there, inshallah, tomorrow, the day after. And I'm very grateful for what I'll be doing. But also when I'm there, it won't just be about doing the ziyarah and going to do my visitation. Of course, I'll be doing that. But my duty is towards humanity. My duty is towards the widows, the orphans, the poor. My duty is towards those that are in need, because for me, that's what it's all about. That's how I connect to humanity. And I think that's, I would say personally, my role, and possibly others should try to do more humanitarian work, because I feel that this is the role model that's been set for us. When we read about Bibi Fatima, Imam Ali, Imam Hussein, and Imam Hassan that gave up their fast, their food for 3 days when their door was knocked. When we learn all of these things, when we hear it, it just goes in one ear and it flies out the other. And you just walk past somebody who's homeless and in need, and you just throw them a meal deal or a couple of pounds, or in Sheikh's case, a couple of dollars. And you don't actually think about what it is they need. You know, you don't spend time. Time is the biggest asset, the biggest value that you can give to anybody in need. So when you go to the Imam, and when I step into that haram and then I approach the Imam, alayhi salam, I'm all cognizant that I'm in front of his Zariya's shrine, but the Imam is with me now. The Imam is here. You know, he's all ever present. Allah is with me, for he is closer than my jugular vein. So how can he not be witnessing what's going on right now? So when I have the opportunities, alhamdulillah, to go on this blessed journey, I will not forget those that are in need and those in suffering. And inshallah, we'll try to raise as much awareness and help as we can.
Inshallah.
Inshallah. Sheikh, I work with Neil a lot, so he's like this all the time, as I'm sure you know as well. But it gives me the point of thinking where it's an example of someone who's found their purpose through a reflection of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. In this case, it's the dimension of serving and humanity. And that's one of the crucial parts of about that, but there are obviously many. And I think there are a lot of people watching who are looking for purpose, or are looking for a way to find a channel by which they can be themselves, or know what to do, or maybe even deciding a career plan or a relationship or something, but we are looking for something which we just don't have. And a lot of people go through that feeling, and we all feel it at some point. In fact, some people feel it consistently. Does Imam Hussein help? Does Muharram and Ashura help for someone who's trying to figure out their purpose? How do we arrange these ideas so that we can kind of be productive in Muharram?
Well, I think that Muharram, we should not rely on the mimbar to find our purpose. The mimbar is a guide. It's a tool. But if you want to find your purpose, you got to start by looking within yourself. Don't expect anybody to give you your purpose. You know, when you attend, if you attend lectures or you're listening online or whatever it is that you're doing in terms of listening to other people speaking, approach it in the not in the way of this is what I'm looking for. Approach it in saying, what good can I gain from what this person is saying? Right? So even if the topic is not necessarily something that I immediately thought of as being relevant to me, the mu'min, as Neil says, is always in the state of absorption, absorbing.
Mm.
Be open-minded, absorb things, right, into your worldview, and see how, always be open to learning. I think that this is one of the most important things. And I don't think we'll ever discover our purpose in a total way, because life is disorienting. And we should not be expected to find out, to say, I have found my purpose in a real, complete, total 100% way. I think we should be okay with saying that I'm searching. We shouldn't feel bad about that. Mu'mineen should know that we're all on a journey, and that journey has ups and it has downs. And the beauty of the month of Muharram is that's a time at which everyone comes together for that singular purpose, which is to remember the tragedy of Imam Husayni alayhi salam, and an opportunity to get closer to Allah and to the Ahlul Bayt salam alayhi. And I think that is like a catapult in itself for you to start thinking about your purpose in life, about what it is that you want out of life, what worldview do you want to form? What worldview do you have, right? So it should become like a catapult towards introspection, self-introspection. And if I could give maybe the 3 R's here: remember, or reminder, remember, or rather reminder, reflect, and reform. So what you hear may just be a reminder. You may already know, about this or that or whatever it is. Come with an open mind. Don't assume that you know everything, and don't assume that you're going to hear something new all the time. Right? We're in this obsession. We have this obsession of new, right? Where we've never perfected old, right? So it's a reminder. Whatever you're going to hear, come with humility, with waqar, with sakina, with khudu, with khushu', with tawadu', all these attributes of humility and simplicity, and listen. And then reflect and ask yourself, am I really implementing all this in my life? Do I really know the Imam in this way? Reflect over yourself, and then reform, number 3, right? And then say, okay, now what steps can I take to achieve those goals of what I want to do, right? So think of it as the 3 R's, right? Reminder, reflect, and reform. And if you approach Muharram with this mentality or with this attitude, I think that you can get a lot out of it, as opposed to saying, what am I going to learn new this year, right? I mean, it's not a product, we're not looking to buy a new shirt or a new car. Sometimes we commercialize these things in such a way, and we turn it into some kind of sideshow. But really, it's about reflecting and reforming, right? And that could be on the same old message that you might have heard before, but there might be some part of it that's expressed in a way that you haven't heard before. So focus on the positive, not on the negative. Focus on what you're getting and not what you're lacking, or what you feel that you're not getting. I think that's an important. And then as far as finding your purpose through Muharram, each person's on their own journey. I don't think purpose is like a puzzle that just somehow one day it just clicks together. It's not like that. It's much more abstract and personal and intimate for any one person to say that I've kind of do 1, 2, 3 and you'll find your purpose, right? You just got to kind of be there, be present, go with the flow, and Allah will guide your hand. Allah yahdi man yasha bighayri hisab. Allah guides whom He wills. But you have to open your heart to God's guidance. It's not us that finds purpose. It's Allah that implants the purpose in our hearts. We don't find purpose. The Quran says it's not us that find the purpose. It's Allah finds us and chooses us to have purpose. That's tawfiq. That's tawfiq. That's God's blessings, basically. And then we might lose that purpose for a while and then go back into hayra and confusion and then go back to purpose again. And that's okay. And we shouldn't feel bad and we shouldn't feel depressed and we shouldn't feel down because that's normal. That's a part of the fluctuations of human spirituality.
Yeah. Very good. It's very much like a roller coaster ride of emotions. And as the respected Sheikh said, you know, it's one step at a time. Baby steps sometimes it's a leap, sometimes you're running, sometimes you're walking. But as long as it's forward, and forward is always the motion, because Allah in His infinite wisdom has put our eyes at the front of our head, our feet facing forward. You try to look backwards, you can look backwards and reflect for a very small moment in time. It actually hurts to turn your head backwards. But even when you're backwards, your head is forwards. And understanding in that direction that you're facing, you may hit a crossroads and you may be up and it may be down. But there's beauty within the up and down struggles. There's beauty within that crossroads and understanding your purpose. So don't feel down about one day I did this, one day I've been praying Salat Alayh for the last 40 nights, but I couldn't even get up for Fajr the next night 41. Don't beat yourself up about it. You know, learn from it, reflect upon it. And when you're thinking about Imam Hussein alayhi salam and the battle of Ashura, on the day of Ashura, look at the holistic picture of it. Look at the whole message of it. See what you can take out of it. And as Sheikh said, you're maybe not going to learn anything new, but what can you actually do? These are reminders. These occasions, astaghfirullah for calling it an occasion, but these momentous 10, 12 days of lectures, they're reminders for us. Let's stop a minute. Let's listen. Let's think. Let's reflect. Let's take it in and take it on board. Make it part of your DNA. Create healthy daily habits. Do something. Make a change. Why don't you write an agreement right now? Just a day or so before Muharram. Like literally write an agreement. Write down these 12 days. This is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to make a change. I may just take one thing from this. I'll be more altruistic. I'll wake up, I'll pray Salatul Layl, I'll wash the dishes for mom or whatever it can be. Just make a change for betterment of yourself and move yourself forward in that direction. It's work. It is work, and it's continuous work that we need to keep on doing and understanding and knowing that the struggles that the Imam faced on this day, on the day of Ashura, you know, we face these kind of struggles and challenges all the time. In the times of despair, it's how you're going to move forward. And as Sheikh said, you know, you take one step closer to Allah, He'll take 10 steps towards you. So never lose that God consciousness, never lose that faith, never lose that desire for perfection of oneself and knowledge of self. Keep moving forward, forward, forward.
And if we have to take a break to stop to realize that, then allow ourselves that break, especially if we've not been looking at things in this way and not getting all of those benefits. I mean, you mentioned suffering. There are people out there who are suffering with some of the most terrible tribulations, and Islam has the resources for dealing with them in maybe a more productive way than they are right now, but they just haven't made that link. They haven't, you know, looked for that solution in faith. And we hope people do that, you know, because otherwise you're deprived of something that was always there. It was always in the scriptures, always in between the lines. It was always in the ahadith. We just didn't expect it from the religion.
You know, Haji Abbas, like, it's as to reform oneself, to invest in oneself can be a scary thing to do because the comfort zone is really comfortable, right? But nothing ever grows in the comfort zone. It takes pain to grow. Yeah. But there's that fear. And there's two sides of fear. We look at fear as a word, F-E-A-R, right? So you can either forget everything and run. That's your fear, right? What do you want to do? Or you face it, you embrace it, you achieve it, and you make it your reality. So there's two sides of the spectrum. But know within yourself how the world works. Yeah, there's always got to be that yin and yang. There always has to be open and closed. There always has to be push and pull, up and down. So you have good days and you have bad days, but always pushing yourself to try for that betterment, whether it's painful, knowing that you're going through that pain because the growth on the other side is more sustenance. Some people look over the garden fence to see whether the grass is greener on the other side. When they actually get there, what they see is a mirror image of their own garden. Yeah, they look at their own grass, but they're not actually seeing that within oneself. So that fear, as I say, forget everything and run, or face it, embrace it, achieve it, and make it your reality.
Ahsan. I want to put one final question. I know, Sheikh, you want to come in, but can I ask like a final question to wrap this up? Just in case, and hopefully you can tie your reflections into this point, which is, because we are coming to the end. Once someone decides to come to this point, so I want to reform, like I've made that choice now. And like we mentioned, however you get there, we have a different journey, but I'm at that point, at least at the point of right now. We have different journeys, but what is the next step once you know you want that change? What comes next? The plan we set for ourselves, it depends on the individual. But if I'm listening right now to this and thinking, I want to have religion in this way, this mindful, present way, what is the next step for the listener? Sheikh, would you like to perhaps share with us, what do you think should be the next action?
I think the first thing is not to make things overly complicated, right? I think sometimes we put so many demands upon ourselves that we lose sight of the forest for the trees. Don't make religion overly complicated until you're ready for that, right? Sometimes, you know, especially with new converts or people that are becoming religious again, they are a little bit overzealous sometimes. And then they burn out, right? Because they can't maintain, they can't sustain that level of commitment, right? So take on the things that you think you truly can manage. I mean, that applies to everything in life, and it applies to deen. Obviously, outside of the wajibat. I mean, obviously, we're all performing our wajibat. That's something else. And keep it simple, right? I think sometimes we look too deeply into things. What do I mean by things? I don't mean Allah and the Aimma, no. But in making certain life decisions, right? Islam has given us very simple guidance for certain things. And when you find those attributes in what you're looking for and what you're working on, then sometimes we just have to move. We have to take a step ahead. We can't be so apprehensive. Trust in God and go ahead. Take the step. If it's, as long as it's not something you're doing that's haram or something that is obviously just, disliked or something, go ahead and take the step. Trust in God, right? I think sometimes we're so scared to take steps in life, in whatever it is that we're doing, right? And especially when it comes to being present in Islam. You know, people often always tell me, well, Sheikh, now I'm not ready. I'm not ready. I'm not ready. And when I ask them, well, what is it going to take for you to be ready? They don't know the answer to that question either. So the answer, what I would often tell them was just be now then. I mean, you've got this grocery list of things, for example, before you can start saying, I'm ready to start praying regularly, or I'm ready to start observing hijab, or I'm ready to do this, or I'm ready to do that, or I'm ready to avoid, boyfriend-girlfriend relationships, or whatever it is, those kinds of haram relationships, if somebody is, plagued with that problem. They keep saying, I'm not ready, I'm not ready. I'm not ready. I mean, to be honest, I think sometimes can be a cop-out here, right? It's no, trust in God. If what you're doing is good in leaving an act or performing an act, then the time is now to do it, right? And I think this is so important, right? And Islam makes things simple for us for that reason. Some things are black and white in life. Mm-hmm. Not everything has to be muddied and complicated. Haq and batil are often black and white, right? We're not dealing with nation states and negotiating nuclear agreements and this and that. No, not everything is a new IEA nuclear agreement, okay? In our life, we got to make things simple sometimes, right? And when you do something, don't look back and say, oh God, I shouldn't have done this, shouldn't have to. Just go forward. Bismillah wa tawakkul ala Allah. Right? And that, in my opinion, or in my from my perspective, becomes so liberating. Not reckless, because you've looked, you're doing something that's good, that's khair. It's not reckless, it's liberating, because you're not shackled by these anxieties and waswas. You release that, you fought it, and that's like kind of like converting or becoming a Muslim, or but we all have our own kind of mini episodes where we go through these things in our life. And as the middle mu'mineen says, as the Quran says, لا تأخذوا في الله لومة لائم, that for the mu'mineen, when it comes to Allah, they don't take any complaint of any complainer. لا تأخذوا في الله لومة لائم. Right? And we also read that in the hadith, rather, that when it comes to Allah, just go. خذ الحق, take the truth and dive into it, as a middle woman, it says. Not I'm ready, I'm not ready, this and that, all of these things. I've heard those for years. I go to the same person a year after, he says, I'm not ready. Next year, I meet him next Muharram, he says, I'm not ready. I said, Baba, you're now 46, 47. Baba, we've been talking about this since you were 40. So, I mean, Imam and Hussein did not say they're not ready. What did they say? They say, I want to meet Allah. This is khair. Let's go.
Yeah.
That's powerful.
Very powerful. Very, very powerful. We say we see these things sometimes, as you said, as massive things in front of us, but just taking those bite-sized chunks, literally one bit at a time. And even if it's that small little step forward or that little bite that you're taking out of it, it all adds up. As Sheikh said with his training, now look at him doing 1,500 push-ups a day on one hand. Subhanallah, Sheikh.
Yes, I mean, when people come to you about this and they ask for next steps, do you say a similar thing? Do you say, hold on a second, breathe, don't think you're going to solve the world in one day? And before you set that plan for them, what is the first advice you give them once they know that they are ready?
Well, we review whatever it is. It can be a multitude of different things that people will come to you with, but generally we try to pick things apart to see where it is they need their help and their support in. We try to look at a theory called the iceberg theory, which is quite a powerful tool about how they see themselves, or others see themselves above the iceberg, which, as you know, an iceberg, it only shows about 20% of what it is. And then below the iceberg, that 75% is all those feelings, emotions, those attributes that are hidden deep within. And then that's a very good starting point to kind of look and try to work on somebody, to try to help them to either bring things underneath the surface or lift things up above the surface, to change people's mindsets, to help them to create the pathways towards their goal, their dream, their destination. Sometimes somebody that I'm working with who is older than myself, so they're sort of mid-50s, is working on finding the inner child. So where did they want to be? What did they want to be when they were younger? They've forgotten their purpose. They've forgotten their state. Now they perform their wajibat, they perform everything, but they've just forgotten who they are. They've become going around in a circle every day, the same thing. And they've done that through raising their children. And alhamdulillah, they picked a job to fit themselves. But the children have grown up and left university now, but you're still doing the same thing because you're on that merry-go-round and you want to get off, but you don't know how to get off because you're, again, in that comfort zone. You're comfortable on your horse going up and down, and the little merry-go-round music, you're happy with that. So trying to bring them and search within themselves, what's that trigger, what's that thing that can help them to make that change. It's about understanding oneself and their people's capabilities, and trying to, as Sheikh said, handhold them, obviously not holding their hands, but trying to get them into a certain place, a certain state. Now, some of the things we do, borderline therapy sometimes, And then I mentor as well. So as well as the mindset life coaching, we do a bit of mentoring. So the difference is life coaching is you find the answers, you ask a series of questions to invoke something. But mentoring is because of life experiences that I've had, able to mentor somebody to try to push them in that right direction. And quite often people say to me, I was facing this difficulty and I felt your hands like pushing me along, because you're able to kind of get that people's mindset into a point that actually you can do this. You can stand firm and you can stand strong. Like we just said about that fear, you know, people look back too much. People don't have that self-belief. And sort of a closing thing from me, it's all about knowledge of self. It's all about that self-awareness of who you are, that what you're capable of doing. Because we limit ourselves. We have barriers that we put on ourselves. The only obstructions in life are the ones we put on ourselves. You know, our bounds of knowledge and thirst and energy are all restrictions that we put on ourselves. It's limitless, absolutely limitless. Just the word knowledge alone means no ledge. There's no ledge to actually thirst. You should continuously learn. You know, these words are attributed in ways that you should actually look at, like impossible means I am possible. Just break things down and try to understand them in a different way. So just keep striving, keep pushing, keep moving forward, people, because you have the ability to make that change. Just self-belief is where it all starts.
For anyone with a growth mentality or with the intention to develop as a human being, this episode is a piece of treasure, mainly because it includes with it our composite as a human being, as those who have the mind as an important part of ourselves. But the mind, when applied to religion, leads to a level of presence and hudur and mindfulness, and a state of calm reflection, which helps to identify areas where we can grow as human beings. And interestingly, as we have seen, our religion is built for this. The verses of the Quran, the prophets, and indeed the Ahl al-Bayt are all part of this process of becoming, as we mentioned, and of slowly realizing what it is and how it is we can best serve this religion, but mostly to enjoy the process. Reforming the mind is to go back to that state of tranquility where we are comfortable and we are safe, and what we are doing is honest and authentic, like our worship. And I hope a point which all of us can take away from that, and I know I will, is the importance of looking at Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam in a positive way. And by that I mean his influence on my life does not end on Ashura. It cannot. I can no longer relegate him to a tradition or a ritual. Rather, as we